Welcome to Dice and Mind, a podcast hosted by Brad Brown and Jason Kaufman to explore the intersection of life, games, science, music, philosophy, and creativity through interviews with leading creatives. All are welcome in this space.
This is an interesting episode because it comes from a book find of yours,
Yeah.
and it was one that kind of surprised me out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up reading about it, and I don't do this that often, but Amazon provided a nice sample of the material,
Yep.
and then I ended up picking it up on through Kindle.
Yes.
And so um, it's a unique, and I'll leave it to you because you can better explain it because you're the one that really kind of sold it to me. Um, it has a unique premise.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. So this is Daydreaming in the Solar System by Moores and Rogerson. Uh, we will say a lot more about that during the interview, obviously. So we don't need to talk much about the book at the moment. But yeah, why did this hook me and why did I bring this up to you? Honestly, selfishly, more than anything, I thought I want to talk to these authors. But it was so beautifully done, so creative. So, Daydreaming in the Solar System, the premise is this is a book about the solar system. This is a book about planetary and other bodies in our solar system. So, it's largely a book on planetary science. It's relatively brief, right? It's an MIT Press publication, so it's really nice and tight, very beautifully produced. Has some commissioned watercolors, which is really neat. But what hooked me, and this, I should say, this came out this past October, I believe. What hooked me is that each chapter begins with an extended vignette where you are imagining, as the reader, you are on or above or in orbit of that planetary or other solar system body. And these vignettes were so nicely done in I'm going to say the near future, right? One of my favorite time periods of
Yeah.
a decade to close to a century from now,
Hmm.
right? Hint, hint, Mongoose Pioneer, hopefully coming soon. But so here's how I liken this. If if we took the novels by Ben Bova, one of my favorite sci-fi authors, and we converted those to like, oh, a brief book on planetary science, and still kept that science fiction element. That's how it read to me. So I found these very, very immersive, the start of each of these chapters. And, for me, like you and I've talked so much about RPG as lit, but also the flip can be true that sometimes you and or I come across books, articles, shows, films, whatever, that inspire imagination in RPG. And I saw
Lit as RPG.
lit as RPG, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
flip of it. And so reading these, I thought, okay, man, um, I I could so see using these vignettes and then the chapters that follow to inform a role-playing game, to just be part of that narrative eclectic, if you will, of having this in the back of my mind when it's my turn to GM. Like there were a few times over winter break while I was reading this, thinking, okay, next time we play Star Trek Adventures, or maybe a future adventure in STA, would I use this to inform some of my world building for the location in which that adventure might take place? So that's why I brought it to your attention.
Yeah, and the near future component to it drew me to it because that's an area
Yeah.
that we've pondered playing in,
Hmm.
we've dabbled developing in.
Hmm.
Now with Pioneer,
Hmm.
um, Twilight 2300 kind of does that, but now Pioneer is going to take it to the next level.
Right.
You have those dark places and a couple other real rules light type of
Yeah.
systems that are out there.
But
But
admittedly, it's hard to find
yes,
material, and you don't. I don't encounter a whole lot of near future sci-fi in general these days.
no,
Yeah.
no, and I think I've pondered this, and I think without Yeah, let's leave that for another discussion. Let's leave that to another discussion because this discussion we have tonight is fascinating enough as it is. So um I'll leave it at that with my realm
Yeah,
because I
okay.
think
Yeah.
this opens up this book opens up and I think you can already
Yeah.
hear that there's more coming even after this book.
Well, yeah, and yep, everyone's going to hear about that. And so let's just preface before we jump into this interview. This is the first of two interviews. Over
Yes.
this and the subsequent episode, we were very fortunate to chat with both of the authors. That's just what the schedule necessitated across the four of us, and we benefit from that because we get to have two different but very tightly related discussions. So here we go with the first of the two. Dr. John Moore is an associate professor at York University and director of the graduate program in Earth and Space Science. He is the science advisor to the president of the Canadian Space Agency and also serves as the director of the Technologies for Exo-Planetary Science NSERC CREATE program, which provides unique training opportunities for graduate students. He previously served as the associate dean of research and graduate studies for the Lassonde School of Engineering at York University. All right. Well, John, it is so nice to meet you and to have you on Dice and Mind, and at least start by talking about a book you and your colleague recently wrote that just came out this past October, which I absolutely loved for multiple reasons. So thanks for being here.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and I'm delighted that you like the book.
I really did. Now, before we could jump in, we just have to put this on air, so to speak. We just moments ago found out that you are yourself a successful retired podcaster who was in the game way before we were.
It's true. It's true. I used to host and show run a podcast back in 2012 called Western Worlds, where we interviewed various people in planetary science and astronomy, and then we talked about it, and it was loads of fun.
And you were doing that as a postdoc, you said, when you had all the free time,
I know it's one of these things, as
right?
you're going through academia, it's like, when you're a grad student, you're just so busy, you can't imagine being busier. And then you become a postdoc and you're even busier somehow, and you can't imagine all the free time you had as a grad student. And then you become a professor and you just can't imagine all the free time you had as a postdoc.
I I'll add a tangent to that, and I'm dead serious. I cannot tell you guys how many times over the past decade and a half that I've stood at the sink doing dishes or loading the dishwasher or unloading the dishwasher or doing something else onerous that involved the kitchen and thinking to myself, I never would have believed I could be this busy having a family, etc., on top of all the things you just said, John. Can you imagine trying to explain this sitting down in college with your college self? And it would be like, hard no, just gonna pass. Yeah.
Oh my, so many things our past selves wouldn't believe.
No.
Just before we got on here, we were talking about storage, just in digital devices these
Oh
days. And
yeah.
just imagine, if you knew it was coming 20 years ago.
Look, when Bill Gates said how long ago that a person will never need more than 768K of storage on their disk, and I don't know that he's been proven wrong. So,
Well, I mean, if you think about it, when you write a paper, I mean, if you strip out, if you're whether you're writing in hypertext or all that, I mean, I guess if you get rid of markup, sure. I mean, you could still fit something on a floppy
no,
disk or whatever,
well played,
but
sir. And the
you know,
entire text of a book is like what, a couple hundred K?
yeah. Yeah, I guess.
There.
I mean, granted, you're
Yeah.
just going to be staring at text all day.
But
You'll have the eyes of a matrix, right?
perhaps, but I do
But
that to books every day, right? I
yeah.
just stare at the text.
Yeah.
I will say it was surprising when we got the typeset versions from the publisher
Yeah.
and the plates were separated out, like the graphics were separated out from the actual text. And I was
Hmm.
surprised, that's it. It's a tiny file.
Yes, it is a little demoralizing to look at a finished book and think, "Oh my God, I mean, like I just snapped something 1,000 times larger with my phone, and I'm going to throw that away in a few minutes. Yeah. So okay, so we need to talk about the book. So this what came out in October 22 from MIT
Well,
Press. Oh,
can I even step back before the book if you don't mind? Just because
yeah.
obviously folks will have heard John, will people have heard your bio before we've jumped
Hmm.
into this.
Hmm.
But um planetary science, how did this pique your interest? How did you get into this type of career? Just because I'll be honest with you, I'm the non-scientist here sitting amongst the trio here. I have a business background, but I'm like the armchair like science wannabe where when I get to talk to people like you, I'm just in awe just because those were the careers and the types of things that I didn't take that path when I was young or when I got to college. You know, destiny drove me a different direction, but I'm just fascinated by it. How did you end up going that direction?
Well, it was a little bit circuitous. I think I came out of high school and I was, good at chemistry and good at physics. And I enjoyed science fiction. And I decided, well, I can't go into science. I have to be useful. So I decided I'd go into engineering. And so I went into engineering at the University of Toronto, here in Toronto. And I got into a program where we were sort of, designing things to go fly in the atmosphere and in space and whatnot. And there was this course that I took where we had people from McDonald's Atweiler and Associates. They came down and they taught us all of the bits and pieces of how to put a spacecraft together.
Oh,
And we used an actual NASA call for spacecraft.
oh,
That was the template of the course.
yep.
And the thing that surprised me about it, though, was that we didn't talk about the science at all. And it struck me, well, where this spacecraft is going and what kind of science it's going to do, that's kind of important. And so, I dug deeper and deeper into the science, and I found that I really liked it. And so after that project, I was thinking more about the science side. And the thing that clinched it for me was when I learned that the engineers get to build the spacecraft and they go deliver it to the scientists.
Yep.
And then they go build another spacecraft. But the scientists get to have the fun. They get the keys. They get to explore
Yeah.
and to drive this thing around and to look into stuff. And that was just amazing for me. So I went and did planetary science down at the University of Arizona for my PhD
Oh, yeah.
and just loved it. I mean, I think it was a few weeks after I got there, they won the Phoenix mission, which went to Mars in 2008. And I ambushed the PI actually at the press conference, just coming off the stage, and asked him for a job. And Peter Smith, he gave me one, so that was
Wow.
wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's impressive. That's really impressive. So you've been at this for a while then.
I have. It's one of the things that was really useful in the book, I have to say, because I've
Yeah.
sort of lived and breathed this topic for the past 20 plus years now. I hate to admit it. Uh, a lot of the stories, just sort of like, came a little bit naturally, I found. And it was really enjoyable to play in that space in a different way than I
Hmm.
do professionally.
Hmm. Hmm. Fascinating. Okay, before we go any farther,
Sorry, I didn't mean
no,
to
no, no,
interrupt the
this is
book
good
talk.
because we get there either way. We need to talk about the book for a sec. I want to state that obviously we'll have it linked, but I want to just note the title and ask a couple questions about this. This is Daydreaming in the Solar System, Surfing Saturn's Rings, Golfing on the Moon, and Other Adventures in Space Exploration. And to the credit of you and your co-pilot Jesse Rogerson, you actually write about all of those things and more. So I'm just gonna I have a question, then we'll just go wherever you want to go. But I want to start by saying what what attracted me to this title was because I read like I'd show you my bookshelf now, but it's completely bare because as we record, I am 2 days away from a complete demolition and renovation of my home office. So I don't have any books. That's why I keep looking online, and I don't have yours because it's somewhere in the next room amongst many others, probably under a towel. Uh, but all of the chapters start with lengthy vignettes. They start with these fictional or science fictional snapshots, and they're not quick. They really, you guys develop them, and they're beautiful. And when I looked at the, I think I must have just skimmed just the little bit that MIT Press, or maybe it was Amazon, had on, like you get the little excerpt. And I think I saw like the first one, and then I also saw the little bit of the the not the forward, but your for kind of your introduction, where you talk a little bit about this is where you're coming from. I was already hooked, but then reading each of these chapters, it it did it for me, John. It was so immersive. It was like, okay, someone else, it's like they've been reading Ben Bova since they were kids like me, and they managed to take it that step further where boom, here it is, it's you. And then there's this really elegant shift that's almost silly at times, I think intentionally, into the science of it, but always with that reference to, but this is what it might be like. And like it was clear that you guys had fun writing it because it translated across all those chapters. And we'll go wherever you want, but I do want to ask the question so I don't forget. What motivated writing the book like that?
Well, first of all, thanks so much. I'm just, so touched that the stories were able to speak to you, as a first-time author, that's just amazing to hear. In terms of where did the stories come from and why did we choose to write the book the way that we did? Well, what we were trying to do was to do this sort of marriage of science fiction or
Hmm.
speculative fiction
Hmm.
and to put that together with science fact. And the reason was when we actually started this project, which I can't believe it now, was in 2019,
Wow.
we ended up thinking, well, Jesse and I, we both do a lot of science communication, and we like to share the excitement of, what
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
find out in the universe with other people. But at the same time, we really liked science fiction. And so we were thinking, well, maybe there's a way to combine the two of these because science fiction, it really grabs people, it really engages.
Hmm.
But the problem is a lot of the authors out there, you look at the universe as it is and you're like, I can make some tweaks to make that more fun and a little bit better. But from our perspective, we're thinking, well, the universe as it is a fascinating, incredible place. And on the sort of pure science side of things, you've got the situation where, Jesse and me, I mean, we're space nerds, so we'll read anything. But we do recognize that sometimes some of the results from the missions or whatnot can be maybe not the most accessible thing ever, and they're not always presented on human terms. So
Hmm.
you might have, the robot went out and made the following discoveries. But what does that mean for somebody who's sort of standing there? If these other places were national parks, what would you experience? What would it be like to be there? And
Yep.
so that
Yep.
that was sort of why we have this sort of two-sided structure to it. And as for the stories, well, we quickly discovered that we just can't have someone take a walk everywhere. That just wasn't that interesting. And
Good.
each
Good.
place has a different piece, I think, that makes
Hmm.
it interesting. And so we wanted to pick an activity like something you might do at a national park to really sort of draw out the unique thing about
Hmm.
that particular place.
I that's interesting. That makes sense in retrospect. I was impressed how everyone was fresh. Like you could imagine a through line, but everyone was different. And what got me is some of them obviously because like, you're or I shouldn't say you're we, because the reader you feel like you're there. We're on Titan. I'll just say I was thrilled to see Pluto and some of the other stuff like because still no one's really writing a whole lot about it. But I thought the little fictional cheats of like you were really upfront, like we're kind of assuming this has been figured out and so this technology whatever it is available. And I was impressed because like it worked every time. Like it never felt like we were leaving plausibility. It's just maybe some of these will be in 10 years and maybe more like a century, but it never took me out. It was always like, yep, this is legit.
Yeah, that was the idea because we were thinking when we were going through this, a lot of books that are kind of towards this space. There's not
Mm,
a lot that are really like this,
mm-mm.
but they tend to be kind of tech focused. And we wanted to focus more on the environment and on the landscape.
Yeah,
And I think the thing that really, that eureka moment was when we realized, if you're, you know, everybody can have the experience of flying in an aircraft without knowing how an aircraft works.
right.
So
Mhm.
there's
Hmm.
no reason why the people who are out, having these particular little adventures, they don't need to know how every piece of equipment they have works, how the transport works. So somebody who's going and doing that might describe things about it, but they might, not actually, and it might not matter how it actually works. And we tried to be playful with that a few times. Like when we needed, I think one of the Venusian chapters, we take a sample, and I think the line goes something like, there's some fancy physics to how this works, but you don't understand it,
There
right?
were a few times where I laughed while reading the book. I thought it worked pretty well. Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
Jason's the one that found the book. I had picked it up. Just I have a My name is Brad, and I have a problem when it comes to books. And
Well, you have
so
select areas. I think my problem with books might be more expensive than yours.
Well, mine's more broad because
Yeah,
and
true.
mine was this was a bit of a visceral thing where I snagged it on Kindle once he started
Did you?
talking it
Yeah,
up.
good.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Because there was an immediate gratification component to it by being able to grab it. And what's nice is that the by looking at it on the Kindle, you could actually like in effect you could read a sample and the first section on golfing on the far side of the moon was the first thing that you could read. And for me, as a wannabe terrible golfer who hasn't golfed in a while, but just being able to see that what caught me wasn't the golfing aspect of it, was the the interlacing of science into it in the way where um and this may I'm just again I'm not the scientist of the group here, but it's a primer, but it's not a primer.
Hmm.
And I, for some of it, it's a review because I am, I read enough where, I have a little bit of knowledge
Hmm.
beyond just the average Joe. Um, but I found it fascinating. And then as I got further into it, there's obviously stuff that I wasn't aware of. Just because I'm not in the field. And I think that's what drew my attention to it. And I think that's what can get other people's attention is the fact that the vignettes and the stories and the way that science is interlaced into it
Hmm.
um is that it's not a storybook, but it's a storybook science book, and it can draw
Well,
people in who don't have to be you don't have to be a scientist to
but
enjoy the
I
book.
think to your point though, like
Yeah.
it worked, the fact that it worked so beautifully for both of us, right? Like John, my first love was astronomy, going back to first grade. I never pursued it because math wasn't my thing. I can do my stats, I can do what I need to do, but that I was never going to be able to hack it in a math centric, like just a totally math dependent field of science. But astronomy was my first love. So I've been reading astronomy, and like my bookshelf is predominantly like physical and biosciences. And I've been reading astronomy and then eventually astrophysics and all this stuff literally since I was little. And I love that I learned from every chapter, right? In part because it's so current. Like you guys
Mhm.
really got the latest stuff in there. But then it was in a way that like well, both of us could get something out of there wherever we were in terms of
Mhm.
knowledge base and enjoy. By the way, shout out, I loved that you had the far side of the moon. It's just
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but some of this again, like ever since Ben Bova died, like no one's writing about some of these places. And then we have stuff like then reality like Shanghu 6 and all of this stuff happening that's not making it into the news in the States very well, right? Because it's not an American mission. And then all of this stuff, here it is in the book. That was just very cool.
Well, thanks. And I find it fascinating, every time I do one of these podcasts and talk to a different person, they like a different chapter. So I like that there's that, sort of broadness to it. And I'm also glad that you enjoyed the idea that, this is something that we were hoping to have a lot of different kinds of entry points into it. Like if you like the science fiction walkthrough kind of stories, you can just read that. You don't have to read the second half of the chapter with the science if you don't want to. But if you want to dig deeper, you've got that there with you. And initially we were designing this for people who, had completed high school, so adults. But there's, I think, enough there that if you were a particularly motivated, child, the math is not so, and we don't have that much math, I should say. This is not like a mathy
Oh
book,
God, no.
but I think somebody who is younger, who is motivated, this really
Hmm.
provides them a way to go down the rabbit hole just a little bit, just enough to pique that interest and that curiosity, I would
Hmm.
hope.
I could
Yeah.
see, again, I'm no expert, but I could see, teen and above grabbing this and reading those
I was
stories
gonna say middle
and
school
yeah,
easily. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
seeing and using that as even a jumping off point, seeing enough math in there and just being intrigued by it and it being one of those situations where they want to know more.
Mhm.
They want to dive deeper into it. You know, like, I have one upstairs. I have an 18-year-old who's in the sciences, and I could have seen them if they would have had that book, if she would have had that book at a younger age, I could have seen them saying, okay, I maybe want to dive into something like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know with yours too, Jason, you have two burgeoning scientists
Maybe,
potentially.
maybe,
Yeah.
maybe, yeah.
So
So one of the things we like to do, John, is when we talk to creatives, scientists, writers, all this stuff, game designers, like we like to explore what's also like the back half of it, right? Like the stuff that readers, viewers, players aren't going to see. So I am curious because I love that this came out from MIT Press. Right? Part of it is just uh I read a lot of MIT Press books. I just like how they do it. Like they're willing to take on a surprisingly broad range of stuff, and they're always relatively well, no, they always are briefer volumes that are, you know what I mean? Like you're not going to be stuck for hundreds of pages. It's
Oh yeah.
they're tight and they but I saw the title and I
so you're saying
started
it's not a Jason Kaufman lecture, in other words.
exactly right.
Okay.
And so nailed it on the head.
Yep.
And I'm going to explain that in 31 bullet points. But
Okay.
before I do, so I started like I was looking at the excerpt and I'm like, I'm totally reading this. I texted my wife, I'm like, never mind what I just sent you. This is what I want for Hanukkah. Here's the link. I'll wait. I don't want to wait, but I'm gonna wait. Okay, that said, but I was impressed that you could convince an editor to run with this just because it is, especially for, well, it is atypical in general. I don't think there are many books out there that have chapter vignettes that are like that. I wish there were more, but I didn't expect, I mean, don't get me wrong, like I read a book on Atari from MIT Press. Like they're willing to play, no pun intended. But how did you convince them that this was sufficiently, I don't know, like how do you convince them that that even works for a press like that? Like academic press, no question. But this is such a unique animal, the book.
Yeah, I think the secret here, like you're saying, it's a question of, h- you know, you think that it would be difficult to convince, an editor, and us too. We realized, at the start, who's going to publish this ridiculous thing that we're putting together that's sort of halfway between fiction and halfway between nonfiction,
Hmm.
because in the book publishing world, those are just
Totally different.
totally different areas. You know, one company doesn't typically even do both of those. So,
Mhm.
do you talk to a sci-fi publisher? Do you talk to academic press, trade press? Where do you take this thing?
Mhm.
And I don't think we could have published this with anyone else other than MITP. We had had conversations with other publishers who had expressed a certain amount of interest in it, but not really excitement.
Mhm.
And when we talked to to MITP, specifically Jeremy Matthews, who was our first editor there. We explained the concept to him, and then we sort of sat back nervously, but he just got it,
Oh, that's cool.
and he became such an advocate for the book in the early phases of helping us to refine that concept and to fight those battles for us within the press, for the concept. And I remember when we just started out, we were kind of curious. So, what else had this particular editor done? And he passed us along the dialogues. And there was another book that combined Arthurian legend with unsolved mathematical puzzles.
Oh,
And we
that's
read
cool.
both those books, and we were like, no, this is this is the place for us. And we haven't looked back since. It was really, really a great partnership, I think. Um, and I have nothing bad at all to say about MITP.
That's awesome. That's so nice to hear. But that's a cool story.
Do you and obviously it's first book from what you said. Um, just out of personal curiosity, maybe you don't have enough of a sample size yet or data for it. Is there a difference when dealing with um like a Canadian publisher versus like an American publisher, or is it really just potato potato, you know? Or
Yeah,
is it
I
is
wouldn't
it color
say.
color with the U or color without the U, I guess maybe, you know.
Yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask that because while we had talked to a Canadian press at the start before we went with MITP, I'm not convinced that any differences we saw between the two were because they were in different countries.
Okay.
And the distributors are all sort of amalgamated now because I mean
Yeah.
MITP is with Penguin Random House, and that gives us a fair bit more reach than I think we had ever imagined when we started writing this
Yeah,
thing.
that's
And
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I think when we began, we were like, well, darn it, if we have to self-publish this on Amazon ourselves, we're going to do that. But I'm glad
Good
we
for
didn't
you.
have to.
Yeah. Have you seen physical copies in stores?
We've seen a few of those
That's
around here,
cool.
mostly in the independent bookstores.
Nice.
That's
Nice.
awesome.
Yeah, that's where you want them. I mean, not for sales, I suppose, but still, like that's where you want them. Okay, so I have to ask, and we're not asking for spoilers, so you could just, plead the fifth. I'm curious though, just based on my impression reading the book, and clearly the joy that went into writing it, and that we're hearing right now from you. Did it light a fire to do something else? Do you have a project you want to do next? A book?
Oh yeah, there's definitely more writing that I'd love to do. So, Jesse and I, of course, hope to continue some more of these, daydreaming books, perhaps in the
Awesome.
future at some point. In fact, there's a bit of an epilogue in this book that I think sort of hints towards that.
Oh, I
Just
have to go
just
back to that.
yeah, just like any respectable film these days, we have to set up the sequel, whether or not we're going to
Very
have
good.
one.
Very good.
And there's another book that
But it doesn't say at the back John and Jesse will return like at the end of a Marvel movie or anything like that, does
no,
it?
no, no.
Okay.
Nothing like that. And the epilogue we actually set up to sort of sum everything up. So there's a call out to every other chapter, but it's the overall, I think arc of that. It's only short. It's only a couple pages,
Yeah.
but it might give you an idea where we might want to go next.
Okay, this is so unfair, John, because I physically can't get to the book right now. And I
I
and I
can,
oh
I
you can,
can.
that's true. And okay, we'll connect offline and because I read it while we were in California traveling and visiting family and I was so happy with it. And and then of course I brought it home and now it's packed. This is so unfair. But I'm glad to hear that because I will be going back to the epilogue. I'm curious, how did you and Jesse connect? I know you're both at York, but like what made you guys think that we want to write together and write something like this?
Well, it's well, Jesse and I have known each other for a long time, so we've been friends oh goodness, now like 17 years. So it was born out of a couple of different things, I think. Like we sort of helped each other with our careers. I was just finishing up my doctorate when Jesse started, and I had actually come up to York to do a visiting scholarship during my last year of my PhD, and that's when he had started at York as a PhD student. And we just sort of ended up, doing a lot of talking and staying in each other's orbit
Yeah.
for quite some time. And what had happened by the time 2019 ran around was I was thinking about books and thinking, gee, it'd be nice to write something there. But I didn't initially know sort of where to start with that. And part of what I think was driving me was that during the 2010s, I had set out to read every Hugo, Nebula, and Locus Award winner. And I managed to do that over the decade. So I had sort of, ingested all of this classic science fiction.
Wow.
And, I wanted some way to really combine that with what I knew about the universe. So I went away on my first sabbatical because I was at York now as a professor. And I read a book that a friend of mine had written, Ray J. Wartana, who's now at Johns Hopkins. And that this is was a bestseller in its day called Strange New Worlds about exoplanets.
Okay.
And it's a great book. It's a science communications type of book.
Mhm.
So very much, science fact, but Ray's a great communicator. He tells it really well. And I remember getting to the end of that and thinking, and I think it's just it's a testament to how accessible he makes it that I finished reading it and I'm like, huh, I bet I could do something like that with the solar system.
That's
So
cool.
I started having these conversations with Jesse. He was at the Air and Space Museum in Ottawa at the
Hmm.
time,
Hmm.
and we just started sort of spitballing what we want to do. Jesse had a little online thing that he did for the museum where he imagined different scenarios in space, and I had helped him with some of the math on that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we sort of were playing around with these different ideas, and then I came back to York. I got busy. The pandemic hit, and we decided, you know what? We could do with an excuse to actually spend some time with each other
It's
and be
nice.
social where we can't actually, you know, do anything. So
Yep.
we set up a regular time and we started writing and we started talking and, we started to accumulate text doing that.
Mhm.
And then it was a matter of, okay, it sounds like we're serious now. Let's do some of the businessy aspects of this and see if we can find a publisher and
Mhm.
whatnot.
Mhm.
And this is again where Ray was really wonderful and really helpful because he's the one who introduced us to the MIT press.
Mhm.
And yeah, the rest is kind of history there.
That's great. That's really neat. It's those are just the best projects.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I feel like I don't know if your listeners have in their mind right now, Jesse and I, in deep conclave, writing text for 2 hours, but really it's more like this for like an
Yeah.
hour and 45 minutes, and then it's like,
Right.
okay, we have to write something today, right? And then you go through that, but it's the connection, and the book really was what came out of that.
That's really neat. That's just sweet. That makes it all the better.
No, you could see that. I mean, when you have a good relationship with your partner like that, with your
Hmm.
with your with your co-author and everything like that, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And it
And I
helps
mean,
how we set it up, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 no. Keep going. Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Like one question that we often get when we're talking to folks, especially folks who are a little bit more curious about the process of writing a book.
Mhm.
They say, oh, two of you wrote this. That's weird. How did you avoid killing each other?
Mhm.
And there's this sense that, if you had two people sharing some creative vision, that it's very difficult for them to work together. And what ended up happening is that this book and the structure to it actually lends itself, I think, really well to having those two voices. And we decided to actually try and use that a little bit, to lean into it. And so for most of the chapters, and there are chapters where we swap roles, but because I had that sort of, innate planetary science knowledge in
Mhm.
my head, I did the stories. Jesse comes from a background of astrophysics and, in fact, galactic astrophysics.
Mhm.
So he knows space, but he's not sort of living and breathing planets. So for him, this was an opportunity to do a deep dive on a topic that he loved, but he wasn't professionally familiar with.
Nice.
And so he did a lot of the science side of it.
Mhm.
And so we were able to try to have the first half of the chapter and the second half of the chapter kind of talk to each other. And so if they sound a little bit different to you, it's because of the process of creating them.
That's neat. It certainly works. Like I thought the balance in each chapter was really good. Yeah.
It's, you bring up an interesting point though, because I think, just talking with, we talk to creatives that are solo writers that write, fiction novels. You know, we're talking with you. It's in the future. We'll talk with Jesse. Jason,
Mhm.
you've written with with Dr. Aaron. Um, you know, I don't write for publishing, but in the business world, I've collaborated on a lot of
Mhm.
stuff and written a lot of stuff. I never it to me it's almost more unusual for me to write solo just based off of the environment I work in versus collaborating with someone. So for someone to say that like that to you, I had to when you said that I had to pause because I'm like, not working in a collaborative environment is more unusual for me than it is to have to work in with partnering with someone or something like that.
Oh,
So,
definitely. I mean,
you know,
on a professional level, I feel like, the last every paper I have has like at least five
yeah,
other people on it, if not like 105.
yeah.
I always liked, and I do still like, but I always liked working solo. And then I just started collaborating with people, sometimes out of interest, sometimes out of necessity, right? Well, and and every single time I've done that, whether it's books or research, it it's so much more enjoyable, to be honest. Like what you were describing, John. I mean, the conversations, some of which stay on topic, right? The double checking one another, the challenging each other's logic, challenging the flow of the thinking or the outlining. It's not that I'm not still engaged in solo endeavors, but I've kind of been converted. And especially now that, you can do all these projects like on Google Docs or whatever is your poison, where it's so easy. I mean, Brad, you do this, right? And we've done
Hmm.
this. It's so easy to collaborate now on that piece that I don't know. I find myself in agreement increasingly with both of you that there's just a real joy in sharing some of these things.
Yeah, you end up making one another better, I find.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
on a professional level, I think it would be hard to go back to writing completely solo. I'd be worried about, what am I missing? What's the angle here that I'm just not getting because I'm not having that, being forced to actually explain what I'm doing to somebody else and, seeing how they react to it. And sometimes when you get these really big collaborations, sometimes they can be a little bit forced, but sometimes there's just magic to them. Like I remember doing a collaboration that was, between Toronto and Canberra in Australia. And that one was just fascinating because we were completely out of phase with each other.
Mhm.
So we would write during our day, and
Oh
then,
man.
we'd go to bed, and then they'd write during their day,
Yeah.
and you'd go back and forth, and it just came together so
That's neat.
quickly, and you just wait to see what was there in the morning, right?
That's pretty cool. Instead of waiting, why isn't he emailing me back?
Get up in the middle of the night. What are they writing? You know,
It was a
it,
Google Doc. I could have watched it in progress.
yeah,
I
I
was
should in
gonna
real time.
say it's not spooky.
Toothpicks in
Yeah.
your eyes.
Yeah.
You have to wait and see.
Yeah.
I have to ask, you have some planes and since we're in audio, the folks can't
Yeah.
see it, but you have some pictures in the background that are of
Hanging
jets
on the
or
wall.
planes.
Yeah.
Is there any significance to it, or is it just just a general fascination.
Interesting.
I grew up here in Wisconsin, here in Milwaukee area. Jason grew up closer to it, near the Experimental Aircraft Association. So I grew up loving jets and loving planes and all that. So anytime I see something like that, I just have to ask.
I think it's fascinating. So that just to give the the audio version of what these are to your
Yeah,
listeners, there's two classic Air France posters behind me. One of which is for Air France, the main line, and one of which is for I believe it's yeah UTA. Sorry, I'm reading it backwards in the screen
yeah.
here. And these actually come from the Airbus Museum in Toulouse, in France. So they've got a lovely, lovely area with all of this memorabilia,
I'd see that.
from, Airbus, but also, Air France partnered with them. So there's all sorts of Air France branded stuff. And I mean, aviation is something that I've always enjoyed a little bit. So when I did aerospace engineering, one of the jokes was, I've never been a great flyer. So it's like, I want to know more to know why is the plane making that noise and whatnot. And now I kind of feel like, oh no, I know too much a little bit. But you've got that aspect of it that I always enjoyed. And my wife's actually from Gander, Newfoundland, which has a very strong aviation history to it as well.
Oh.
Used to be a refueling stop back
Hmm.
before you could have Easy Trans Atlantic flight, and
Hmm.
a lot of the air traffic control is still in Gander to do transatlantic routing for all the aircraft that come out of
Oh, neat.
yeah, so the Northeast and all that. This is sort of
Hmm.
the last stop they have before they're out over the
Yeah.
ocean and on their own. And one of her relatives actually is one of those air traffic controllers. So
Wow.
it's just a
Neat.
fascinating thing that town.
Wow. Yeah, I have a nephew that's finishing up his degree, and then he's going to be in commercial flight school. So I and I'm like you. I don't mind flying. Um,
Oh, I love.
I'm more of a
Yeah.
homebody by
I love
nature. That's just
flying.
who I am.
Uh,
Um,
yeah.
but I don't. I will go and sit. I love sitting at the airport and watching the planes. That's just you know
Yeah.
we don't see them as many here in Milwaukee, but going to like a major airport, wherever I may be in the States or whatever. Um, I used to have to travel up to Montreal a lot and then go to University of Sherbrooke for work a lot, um, which was a little bit of a challenge because my French is below poor.
I was gonna say
Um,
non-existent.
yeah,
Yeah.
non-existent to I could understand bits of it.
Oh, but
Um,
it's Montreal. It's okay. They understand.
yeah, they understand. You know, what made it worse was I was much younger and I thought I understood, and I really didn't.
I give you
Um,
credit. I can do a bit of French, and in Quebec, I have no idea what anyone is saying. I can't make head or tail of it.
so
Mhm.
but I made up for it because I would wear my Montreal Canadiens stuff, and so they would give me hockey Jason. It's a sports team,
Oh
so
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Go
Jason's
sports.
not a Jason's not a sports guy,
Not
so
entirely, no. No.
no. But they would get away with it. But one more question from me because I want to be very cognizant of your time.
Yeah, it's late there.
Um, is there anything that, just for those of us that maybe aren't watching like the cusp of everything going on, because I'll be honest, here in the US, politics seem to be clouding the airwaves these days. But from a science perspective, planetary perspective,
Or
um,
exoplanetary.
or exoplanetary, um, is there anything that's really kind of caught your attention that maybe that may not have caught or may not be necessarily in the news, or something that for those of us that are like wanna be planet nerds, that we should maybe keep an eye out for, that maybe we haven't heard about?
Well, there's, mostly professionally, I work on Mars, but
Uh,
I always enjoy, the kinds of projects that my colleagues who are out in the outer solar system were working on. And their timelines are so long, they have such patience. But there's two of those missions that are really, really exciting that I want to see what happens with them. So one is Dragonfly, which is a mission to Saturn's moon Titan. It's a quadcopter, gigantic nuclear powered quadcopter,
So cool.
Awesome.
and it's going to go and explore around there. It's just an amazing piece of equipment. Uh, and it's one of these things where you're looking professionally and thinking, how can I contribute to this? How can I get on that team, just to be a little part of it? It'd be a fun place to sort of, spend some time in the latter part of my career. I actually started on Titan before I went and mostly worked on Mars. And the other place, the other spacecraft that really grabs my attention right now, was a little bit into the news around the time that the book came out because the launch was just actually a couple weeks before. Europa Clipper is the,
Yes.
the name of it.
Hmm.
So that one will be to Europa in, I believe it's 2030, and we'll go ahead and take sort of a deep dive, taking a look at that moon, um, staying nice and high for most of its orbit above Jupiter's radiation field, staying safe, and then diving into that maelstrom and taking a close, swing by. So just like a clipper ship taking a swing by the moon and training all of its instruments on it. And one of the really neat things that I think we're all waiting for, that we all want to know in the planetary science community, is how thick is the ice on Europa?
Yeah.
Because we've got
Yeah.
we've got good indirect evidence that there's an ocean there, and it could be really, really massive. It's well protected. It might be a habitable space.
Hmm.
In
Hmm.
fact, it might be, in fact, it likely is a bigger livable volume
Yeah.
than all the places on the Earth where life is found. And we really want to know, where is that interface? And I hope it's shallow because then we might have a chance of going back and
Hmm.
getting down into that ocean. That's been one of the things that's really held my attention through the entirety of my career. I haven't had the chance to work on any Europa projects, but I've been really on the sidelines, cheering them on and really just, fanboying that set of colleagues of mine. And, that's the fun thing. They go to the same conferences I do, so I can see all their stuff as soon as it comes out, which is great.
That's
That's
awesome.
that's so cool. That's so good. I will pipe in that I still would like to see. And I hesitate to use the phrase in our lifetime because that
Mhm.
seems so morose. But as you said, the the number of years it takes to design, get approved, build, and launch these missions is significant. And then, for these outer solar system missions to get them out there, short of like New Horizons, where it's just moving just amazingly quickly, right? But there's no orbit that I would still love to get spacecraft around or at least visiting for an extended stay Uranus and Neptune, right? Totally neglected. And there's going to be stuff that we didn't expect. Every
Oh
single
yeah.
planet and moon has proven that. Like that's the beauty of science, though. We are consistently proven wrong just a bit, and it's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. And we do this exercise within the planetary community. We do it every 10 years. And so
Mhm.
we give the report that we produce this exciting name, the Decadal Survey. And its big priority for this decade is actually to go and visit Uranus and to put an orbiter around that planet and to really understand what an ice giant is like. Because we know
Right.
gas giants. We've
Mhm.
done Jupiter, we've done Saturn,
Yep.
but there's an awful lot of ice giants out there in the exoplanetary menagerie, and we
Hmm.
need to know how they tick to really understand what their potential is in these other places.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd love to see that one as well.
We didn't even get you talking about exoplanets. That what a
Well, it's
what
just
a
another
misuse
reason.
of
We'll just
time.
have
Yeah.
another reason for you to come
Yeah.
back if you're willing, because we could probably talk about the work you've done with the other missions and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
that would be fascinating.
We've only
Of
touched a
course.
little bit.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, well, okay,
yeah.
so maybe a closing question because again, you're an hour later and it's getting late and we don't want to abuse your time. That said, given how evidently nerdy both of you guys are, from I mean, bunch of planetary scientists and physicists writing a pseudo-fictional and scientific book about daydreaming the solar, right? It's a pretty sure thing, right? And so I have to ask, because this is kind of our thing on the podcast at Ice and Mind. Um, who just briefly, any sci-fi authors or series that really have stuck out for you in your lifetime, and or any RPGs that
Or even
pushed you in
games,
directions.
or
Yeah, or games,
games,
yeah.
just
Even more games.
games.
Just curious.
Oh yeah, so and this one's kind of related to the book. I think for both Jesse and I, Kim Stanley Robinson and his
Yeah.
Mars series,
Yeah.
red, green, blue.
Hmm.
Uh, I remember when I was a kid, Red Mars was the first sci-fi book that I read where it's like, oh wow, he's trying to get
Hmm.
this right.
Hmm.
In a lot of other sci-fi, the author has a story in mind and maybe it takes advantage of some special feature of a particular planet or a particular location. But, it's not really about that place. It's about the image that is
Right.
being painted in your head. Um, and I have enjoyed, some authors who really take that bit to heart. Like I love Larry Niven, his
Hmm.
universe, where Mars is just a useless wasteland that no one ever goes to, and he stuck to that even after it was proven wrong. It's like, no, in my universe, all the spacecraft get swallowed up by the sands of Mars. So yeah, I think definitely, Kim Stanley Robinson is one of those real kind of inspirations, and we pay homage to one of his short stories actually with one of the chapters of our book, and to give a contrasting example, we also have another chapter that's an homage to The Little Prince or Le Petit Prince for us by Saint Antoine Exupéry. So that is, I think, a little bit more playful. It really goes with the
Yeah.
watercolor
Yeah.
aspect of it. But of course, reading it as an adult, The Little Prince is actually a fairly deep read, despite the
Hmm.
fact that it doesn't have a lot of text and it's,
Hmm.
got that playful aspect to it as well. So I think those were strong influences
Right.
on me for the book, but also in general. Like I guess with one's first book, you kind of draw
Mm.
directly water from the well.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's excellent. John, thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. It's really been a pleasure, a real treat.
No, my pleasure as well. Thanks so much for having me.
Again, John, thanks for joining us. We learned that John is a podcast pioneer of sorts.
Seriously.
Um, and um, thanks for bringing the mic out again and
Yes.
um, joining us tonight. And look forward to seeing what they're planning on doing again
Oh yeah, I'll
with
be pre-ordering whatever they come out with.
yeah, with future books and all of that. So as we head over to the Loon Cafe, what has been um,
Hmm.
on your desk these
Well,
days?
as you can see from my background, which our audience can't see, my
Yeah.
desk is in a different
Your
location.
desk is a craft shop now.
My desk is a craft shop now. My
Yeah.
desk is ensconced in a space in my wife's office, which is her little, actually not so little sewing studio, which is right, basically just a craft den for space she doesn't use other than for storage. But it's workable, and it is very, very gracious of her to actually, she really wanted me to take a lot more space, and I said no. So I've mentioned this before, but as we are recording, between speaking with John and recording right now, we are at my house 2 weeks in to our renovation downstairs.
In the tech world, we would call it a forklift upgrade.
Yeah, well, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
There have been forklifts coming to the house.
Yeah.
My office is now a storage container for bags of cement, lumber. There's a jackhammer in there at the moment, all kinds of stuff. But what this means for me is because we're we're doing the little downstairs bathroom and then my wonderful large office down here, and it'll be totally worth the disruption and the wait. But it's a complete demo and remodel process. So what's on my desk is literally, you can't see it, but literally nothing other than the computer, which I only bring down to record, the mic, which I hide under the desk so that it doesn't get dusty when the guys are in here to access the electrical panel. So that nothing's on the desk per se. I have a very little spot upstairs that I'm using. That said, I don't think I actually told no, I was waiting actually until we recorded to share this. I finished reading Mistborn
You did.
by
Okay.
Sanderson. Yes. I really pushed. I wanted to be done. I wanted to
Yes.
get through it. I had paused midway because another book had come out, and a partly illustrated book. That's for another discussion. And so I spent the previous weekend reading that, and then I plugged back into Mistborn, and I spent a lot of evenings reading. I enjoyed it. The closer to the end it got, the more I enjoyed it. Like I thought the last chapters were really good, really strong. Um, I'm glad I read it. I don't know if I will read any more of his novels. That's no disparagement. It just, I'm not a
Well,
big fantasy reader.
you're traditionally not
I'm not
much of a fantasy fiction,
at
right, reader
all.
at
But
all.
but I'm really glad I read it. It was very creative. It had, and this is like one of his early novels. I get that.
Yeah,
There were a lot of common tropes. There were also a number of truly novel ideas, and this whole notion of a hard magic, almost a scientifically thought through magic, really was fascinating. The book left me. I mean, talk about good writing. It left a whole bunch of questions open at the end. And so the world building was really cool. And so I don't know whether I will read any more of his novels. I might not, but I am every bit as interested in picking up the Mistborn RPG.
that's what
Yes,
I was going to ask you.
when it comes out next year, that one I want to pick up because the world building is so interesting. So it was a
Well,
win.
for me, I
Yeah.
think I alluded to this.
Yep.
So I started a new job this week. You know this.
Huzzah. I do.
Um, and I had bought a box set. Now,
Yeah.
hold tight on this. Um,
Yes.
and I wasn't going to touch it until I had accepted the job
Yep.
because my goal is
Hmm.
to take time and take a break
Yep.
during the day
Hmm.
and do some reading away from my desk. I have an office
Hmm.
um, and step away. Now that's not going to happen for a couple weeks just because
You
I'm
got to settle in.
acclimating
Yeah,
and settling in, and there's a lot that's going on right now.
of course.
Um, I decided I switched gears and I picked up
Ah.
Mistborn
Oh, you did?
because you had been reading it, and I thought to myself,
Well, this book
because you
isn't
had been reading
1,500
it,
pages.
yes, that, and two, because of the RPG component,
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
it might be a little bit easier read,
Hmm.
um, and it'll be a little bit of time before I can pick that up. And if by chance I can't do it as regularly as I want during any sort of lunchtime,
Hmm.
I can still do it um, at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give myself, I probably won't start it for another 2 to 3 weeks
Yeah.
because of stuff
Hmm.
because of everything that's going on
Yep. Yep.
with me acclimating to my new professional environment. But that is the book that I'm going to start.
Very cool.
Um, and because it's the one that you read, and then I can have discussions about it with you.
Yeah,
Um,
I will look forward to that. I will also say I found myself as I was reading it, especially like the latter part of the book, like latter half. I found myself increasingly thinking, "Oh, I this kind of makes me want to play D&D."
really?
Like, yeah, because the magic. So, okay, I'll just say this. So, the magic in Mistborn is completely unlike the magic, actually, in anything else that I've read or seen, but certainly in D&D, the magic is it's again it's hard magic. So you don't have spellcasters, you don't have magic missiles, you don't. I mean, you don't have. Well, I actually it's just the first of many books. I don't think you have dragons. It's not like that at all. But I found myself like pondering, okay, like if we like with Aaron and Heidi got back in D&D, like would I use some of this? Even to the point of something we'll have to talk more about offline is because the Stormlight RPG comes out first this year.
Mhm.
Would that still be worth getting? Again, just because I'm not familiar with the world, but it's another planet. I think.
Yeah,
But
it's in the Sanderson verse.
yeah, right. The
Mhm.
Cosmoverse.
Is that what it is?
Wait. Cosmoverse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um Anyways, it really, really cool world building. Good. I'm looking forward to talking Mistborn with you.
Yeah, I interestingly enough, because I've I've I haven't had time this week, but well, I guess I hadn't had time this past week. The week before I started working, I spent a lot of time lore reading. That's the term
Oh,
not a
I like
great
it.
term, but
No, I like that.
um, I've been doing a lot of lore reading within the Warhammer universes, both
Uh,
um,
uh-huh.
both the fantasy universe and the 40K universe,
Yeah.
both of them.
Yeah, okay.
And within the 40K, there's multiple. There's the
Right.
you know, and what I am finding interesting, and I'm going to leave this for a future discussion. I'm going to leave this as kind of a hanging chad.
Okay. Oh,
Um,
good.
the Age of Sigmar,
Okay.
the Age of Sigmar gaming verse, um, plays with, if I remember correctly, plays with the same D6 system
Oh,
as
we can both see it. Wrath and Glory. No,
Wrath
wait.
and Glory.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Wrath and Glory.
yes.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking to myself that maybe Age of Sigmar Soulbound. Um, I'm almost wondering if that might be down the road in the future a
Interesting.
better
Oh,
game for us to play.
interesting.
Now it's been a week. I haven't touched anything since then.
Yes.
So I'll get back to it.
Yeah.
But um, fantasy role play, the kind of the grittier, harder version, I
Yeah.
almost wonder if that might be just from a fantasy role play perspective. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be Warhammer,
Right.
but like a grittier type of fantasy role play might be a better option
Interesting.
for us to do some fantasy than like a high fantasy type of thing. Um,
Yeah.
and
That,
it's
yeah.
something I'm saying this out loud because we haven't talked about it offline where
Right.
we would go back and forth. So
Well,
the
and
so
we
the
haven't,
our five listeners
yeah.
are hearing this for the first time as much as you are.
Other than
So
texting, we've probably talked less the past week than we have been in a while.
yeah,
We we've
we've it's been a busy week
right,
and
we've both been swamped, you especially with the new gig.
yeah,
Um yeah, we have a lot of catching up to do. Yeah,
yeah.
that's interesting. Well, I'm curious how that'll be affected once you start reading Mistborn and
Hmm.
whether you think that's gritty or not. Interesting.
And maybe gritty is not the right word,
No, but
but it not as
mhm.
maybe the word is
You know, I
flighty.
keep thinking of Fantasy Age,
Yeah,
I guess actually I'm thinking of Modern Age, but through the fantasy lens of, you can be like superhero-ish, you can be a little more down to earth, you can be super realistic, right? And
or
I
even
think,
GURPSy.
yeah, I think you're just talking about something a bit more like fantasy, but more realistic,
Yeah,
where no, I think, yeah, I think, well,
we're threading a needle. We're threading a
yeah,
needle between
yeah,
D&D and something.
right.
I just
Right.
don't know if we haven't talked enough to figure out what that something is yet.
No, so
You
because
know,
we haven't been talking fantasy much lately, other
no,
than some of this reading.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Oh, and
interesting.
before we go,
Yes, sir.
for a future episode, I just want to ask you. I'm gonna give you two words, and I just want to get your initial reaction. Section 31.
We have you've watched it, haven't you?
I have not.
Okay, so that's your assignment.
Okay.
We have to I'm just going to I'm just not even going to. I'm
Well,
just
I
not
just
going
give
to
me
comment on it.
you could you're not gonna sway it for me one way or the other because I have hard opinions on things with this
Yeah.
type of stuff.
Okay. So I know this is going to be a contentious comment for some of our listeners. Actually, from what I'm reading online, maybe not so contentious. I think it's clear how much I value Star Trek at
Hmm.
so many levels.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
My 17-year-old daughter who watched it with me, Mira and I watched it, and she helped me to contextualize this a little more honestly. I would say overall, not getting specific, overall, it kind of sucked.
You did not. I have not heard you talk about it with me. You have not
Yeah.
mentioned it to me, and the fact that you haven't, and you are not a person as someone who has lived their life studying
I
human behavior and the
I
human brain and everything like that,
I
for you
no
to not mention a peep to me about
that's
this
a good
thing,
I mean we have been busy and I've been purposely
but
laying
not even
off
a
bothering you.
text about
You
it.
know what? That's a very the fact that I didn't call you that weekend.
Yes, I
Um
was absolutely floored.
can anyone say damning indictment? But
Yes,
we
I
will
was shocked.
we're gonna maybe we will maybe we'll talk about it
We'll
in a
have to talk
subsequent
about it,
episode.
and then we'll have to dedicate a Loon Cafe baby to
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I think so. And maybe we'll do that and we'll talk about it through the lens of world building and through the lens of lit. There is much to commend it.
Hmm.
It did not deliver in
Okay.
almost any way.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm still gonna watch it because
Yeah,
it's
please
Trek.
do. You do watch it.
Absolutely. Trek has a much longer leash for me than Star Wars does.
Yes. Yes.
So I will still watch it. I have seen very few reviews just on the periphery because I
Yeah.
just haven't had time to read. And I'll be quite honest with you, with everything going on, um, my social media presence is flighty these days.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I've only seen little bits of what's been read about it. So my intent is I might actually just that might be something for
You
me
need
to watch.
to
I
I
might
think you
watch
need
it
to
tonight.
yeah,
I think
please.
I'll watch that tonight.
Okay, text me when you're done tonight.
Yeah,
And
I might watch it late tonight. It
okay,
might
but
be one of those things where it's like a 10
okay.
o'clock watch.
We'll text me.
Um,
We'll talk and we will talk about it on Dice and Mind.
yeah,
And not to lambast it, but to talk about opportunities and missed opportunities relevant to RPGs, relevant to storytelling, relevant to world building. I
yeah.
think
And
would
I'm a
be
huge
would be interesting.
and I'm a big Michelle Yeoh fan. So um, you know,
Yep. And she,
it's
I mean, as you would imagine, did a beautiful job. Yeah.
I'll even watch I've
The
watched like Shang-Chi just multiple times in the
The
past week because
acting, oh, cool. Oh, see,
you know,
that's yeah. The acting, I'll stop with this. The acting for the most part was very good. That really doesn't stick out for me as a problem at all. Quite the opposite.
got it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
All right, you know the deal, everybody. Thank you very much for being with us. John, thanks again for a really enjoyable, just a fun chat with you. We will, as promised, be asking you to come back. Next week, we will continue walking through the solar system with Professor Jesse Rogerson. Um, then we're not going to tell you. There's more after that, of course. We're going to get to section 31. Stay tuned because believe it or not, we are only weeks away from our fourth anniversary episode. And we're just going to use that episode to look back, look forward. So, you know the deal. Be well, stay well. We will see you in a couple of weeks.